The Story of Ancient Irish Civilization by P.W. Joyce. Chapter 4, How the Ancient Irish Lived as Pagans. When Ireland was pagan, the people were taught their religion, such as it was, by Druids. These Druids were the only learned men of the time, and they had in their hands all the learned professions. They were not only Druids, but judges, prophets, poets, and even physicians. They were the only teachers, and they were employed to instruct the sons and daughters of kings and chiefs in whatever learning was then known. They were also advisers to kings and people on all important occasions. So they were, as we can well understand, held in high estimation and had great influence. They had the reputation of being mighty magicians, and could do many wonderful things, as our romantic stories tell, and as the people firmly believed. They could raise a druidical or magic fog, which hid things from view, or bring on darkness in the day, like the blackest night. They could bring down showers of fire or blood, cause a snowfall even in summer, till the ground was covered half a yard deep, and bring on storms and tempests on sea or land. They could drive a man mad by their sorcery, a power which was dreaded most of all by the people in general. For this purpose the Druid prepared what was called a madman's wisp. That is, a little wisp of straw or grass, into which he pronounced some foul, baleful verses, and watching his opportunity, he flung it into the face of the poor victim, who straightway became a madman, or, what was just as bad, an idiot, all beyond cure. Many other instances of the power of their spells are related in old Irish tales. They were often employed in divination, that is, foretelling the future. Sometimes they forecasted by observing the clouds or the stars, sometimes by means of a rod of yew with ogham letters cut into it, often by interpreting dreams or from sneezing, or by the voices of birds, especially the croaking of the raven, or by the chirping of the wren. By some or all of these means they professed to be able to tell the issue of a coming battle, or whether a man's life was to be long or short, and what were the lucky or unlucky days for beginning any work, or for undertaking any enterprise, besides many other matters lying in the future. The Greeks and Romans of old had, as we know, their augurs or soothsayers, who forecasted the future like our Druids, and by much the same observations, signs, and tokens. We must not judge those old people, whether Greek, Roman, or Irish, too severely for believing in these prophets. For although there are no Druids or soothsayers now, we have among us plenty of palmists and fortune tellers of various kinds, who make a good living out of those people who are simple enough to believe in them. There were Druids in every part of Ireland, but Tara, as being the residence of the over-kings, was their chief seat, where they were most powerful. And those who have read the early history of Ireland will recollect St. Patrick's contest with them, in the presence of King Laoghaire and his court, and how he put them down in argument. The pagan Irish had many gods and many idols. Among other things, they worshipped the fairies, who were and are still called in Irish Shee. The fairies dwelt under pleasant green little hills, and there they built themselves palaces all ablaze with light and glittering with gems and gold. These residences, as well as the elves or fairies themselves, were called Shee. Many of the old fairy hills all over the country are still well known, and to this day there is a superstition among many of the people that the fairies still remain in them, and that they also dwell in the old lisses, raths, or forts that are found everywhere in Ireland. The fairies were not always confined to their dwellings. They often got out, but they were generally invisible. Whenever they made themselves visible to mortals, and that was only seldom, they were seen to be very small, hardly the height of a man's knee. People had to be careful of them, for they often did mischief when interfered with. Manannán mac Lir was the Irish sea god, like Neptune of the Greeks and Romans. He generally lived on the sea, riding in his chariot at the head of his followers. He is in his glory on a stormy night, and on such a night, when you look over the waste of waters, there before your eyes in the dim gloom are thousands of Mananans, white steeds, careering along after their great chief's chariot. Angus Mackinaug was a mighty magician who had his glorious palace under the great mound of Brugh in the Boyne, now called New Grange, a little below Slane in Meath. There were many other gods, and there were goddesses also. Poets, physicians, and smiths had three goddesses whom they severally worshipped, three sisters, all named Bridget. There were also many fairy queens who were considered as goddesses and worshipped in their several districts, all living in their palaces under fairy mounds or rocks. Many of these residences are still well known, such as Carricleerna, a circle of gray rocks near Mallow, where lived Clearna, the fairy queen of South Munster, and Craigley, near Killoway, where Irvin or Irville, the guardian fairy queen of the Dalcassians of Thomond, resided. The people of several districts had local gods also, such as Dun, the king of the Munster fairies, who had his airy home at the top of Knockfierna, near Croom in Limerick; John McEnanty of Scrabo Cairn, near Newtownards; and Tierna, the powerful and kindly fairy lord, who lived in his bright palace under the great Carn in the hill Carntierna over Fermoy. Besides those that were acknowledged and worshipped as gods or goddesses, there were battle furies who delighted in blood and slaughter, also loathsome looking witch hags, and plenty of goblins, spirits, and specters, some harmless, some malignant, who will be found enumerated and described in either of my two social histories. The idols worshipped by the pagan Irish were nearly all of them stones, mostly pillar stones, which were sometimes covered over with gold, silver, or bronze. The people also worshipped the elements, that is to say, water, fire, the sun, the wind, and such like. The worship of wells was very general. Most of those old pagan fountains were taken possession of by St. Patrick, St. Columcille, and other early missionaries, who blessed them and devoted them to baptism and other Christian uses, so that they came to be called holy wells, and though they were no longer worshipped, they were as much venerated by the Christians as they had been by the pagans. It must not be supposed that each of the objects mentioned above was worshipped by all the people of Ireland. Each person, in fact, worshipped whichever he pleased, and it was usual for individuals or a tribe to choose some idol or element or pagan divinity which they held in veneration as their special guardian god. There was a belief in pagan heaven, a land of everlasting youth, peace, and happiness, beautiful beyond conception, called by various names, Tirnanoga, Moimel, Ibrasel, which is often described as being situated far out in the Western Ocean. It was inhabited by fairies, but it was not for human beings, except a few individuals who were brought thither by the fairies. There is a pretty story, more than 1,000 years old, in the Book of Dunkall, which tells how Prince Kona of the golden hair, son of the great King Con the Hundred Fighter, was carried off by a fairy in a crystal boat to Moimel. One day, as the story relates, while the king and Connla and many nobles were standing on a western seashore, a boat of shining crystal was seen moving towards them, and when it had touched the land, a fairy, like a human being, and richly dressed, came forth from it, and addressing Connla, tried to entice him into it. No one saw this strange being, save Connla alone, though all heard the conversation, and the king and the nobles marveled and were greatly troubled. At last the fairy chanted the following words in a very sweet voice, and the moment the chant was ended, the poor young prince stepped into the crystal boat, which in a moment glided swiftly away to the west, and Prince Connla was never again seen in his native land. The fairy maidens chant to Prince Connla. A land of youth, a land of rest, a land from sorrow free. It lies far off in the golden west, on the verge of the azure sea. A swift canoe of crystal bright that never met mortal view. We shall reach the land ere fall of night in that strong and swift canoe. We shall reach the strand of that sunny land, from druids and demons free, the land of rest in the golden west, on the verge of the azure sea. A pleasant land of winding vales, bright streams, and verdant plains, where summer all the livelong year in changeless splendor reigns. A peaceful land of calm delight, of everlasting bloom, of age and death we never know, no sickness, care, or gloom. The land of youth, of love and truth, from pain and sorrow free. The land of rest in the golden west, on the verge of the azure sea. There are strange delights for mortal men in that island of the west. The sun comes down each evening in its lovely vales to rest. And though far and dim on the ocean's rim it seems to mortal view, we shall reach its halls ere the evening falls in my strong and swift canoe. And evermore that verdant shore our happy home shall be, the land of rest in the golden west, on the verge of the azure sea. It will guard thee, gentle Kona, of the flowing golden hair. It will guard thee from the druids, from the demons of the air. My crystal boat will guard thee, till we reach the western shore, where thou and I in joy and love shall live for evermore. From the druid's incantation, from his black and deadly snare, from the withering imprecation of the demon of the air, it will guard thee, gentle Kona, of the flowing golden hair. My crystal boat will guard thee, till we reach that silver strand, where thou shalt reign in endless joy, the king of the fairy land.